Okay, so the Vuelta, let's talk about it. I'm just going to give some thoughts rather than selections, more thoughts and context for guys that spending more time following other sports could help with making their bets. I don't really have many bets in place right now, to be honest, to give. And I'm most giving bets isn't my favorite thing to do. I much prefer just talking about things personally. So that's sort of what I'm going to do here. So the backdrop to this Vuelta, let's talk about some of the things we need to think about when we look at the general classification. That's the main thing we're going to talk about here, I guess. We've got an incredible amount of climbing meters. Um, I think it's like 6,500 altitude meters gained during this entire tour, which is astronomically high. I think the Giro and the Tour were like 4.5, 5,500 or something like that, respectively, this year. I'm not a big altitude numbers guy, but that's more, you know. And you just have to look for the profiles, and that's reflected. We got like 9 uphill finishes and more mountain stages as well, where we have descents, etc. Descended is something that I think could be useful on a few days here. So it's great for climbers, and the time trialing kilometers are pretty low. We've got about 36 kilometers of time trialing, which is definitely on the low side for a Grand Tour. They are two flat time trials, is worth noting. So obviously a flat time trial is it's going to be a little bit more disadvantageous to those who struggle in the time trial and discipline than a hilly time trial. So although we haven't got that many meters, time trialing can still play a big role in this. But this is where the world is sort of branding itself these days. It's not a sprinters tour. We have very limited sprinting stages. That's going to be a key factor maybe for Roglic as we start to discuss his chances. I'll explain why later if that's not already obvious. So yeah, it's one for whoever's got the strongest climbing legs is going to be tough to beat based on the profile. I think a significant factor potentially here, maybe not in terms of who's going to win it, but in terms of just surviving the initial cut down, because we have a lot of depth to this general classification market, right? A lot of guys who at their best are competitive, even down to like 80 to 1, and we're going to lose a lot of guys from the picture in the first week, even. And I think one factor that's going to cause that is the heat. The first week, we're in places in Spain, some of the hottest places like Sevilla. It's going to be very hot. It's going to be 30, 35 degrees, and not all guys cope with that very well. I'm in Malta, that's not entirely close, but the climate right now is very similar. And today I led in the sun for 45 minutes and I'm back here dying. So I think it's going to be a factor. And probably easiest to predict weather. We definitely do have guys that are more or less comfortable in rain or heat, etc. But I'm never so comfortable predicting weather. I think any golf better who on a wind and rainy day tries to bet a typically good wind player has probably experienced the difficulties in this. Sometimes it pays off, e.g., Justin Thomas at the Players or Larry at the Open, etc. But a lot of the times it creates a bit more randomness. But that said, I think it creates less randomness than a 3 week Giro full of rain. It's probably a little bit easier to project who is going to struggle in that heat in who has previously. I think other factors to consider with Vuelta, just based on where it is in the season, is who is targeting the Vuelta from a long way out and who has just ended up here. Um, Cycling, it's amazing how much preparation and goals can impact someone's performances. It's a huge factor. You can't just look on raw ability and hope people are at peak levels. You've got to understand who is going to be peaking and who is maybe going to struggle to reach that level or continue that level for the 3 weeks at least. And then maybe the final thing is maybe not for GC. I think this is maybe for stage things. Something I thought about earlier is sometimes maybe a bit of motivation. You do have people at the Vuelta who are in contract years. The contract's run out. They haven't got a contract yet. Or maybe they have got a contract and they're going to a different team. And that can have an impact on how guys are used. And just like the NFL, for example. You know, you can have a Jadeveon Clowney's of the world who just happened to step up their performance when there's going to be some financial consequences to how they play real soon. So that's another thing maybe for stages. But with that sort of scene set, let's just have a look at the market. I'm going to be looking at the Bet365 markets odds as currently. This is 5:30 Central European time on the 15th. So just a reference point there. Obviously, these prices are going to change. So we've got Roglic at the head of a betting. Let's start with Roglic. My instinct is to be against Roglic here. I think this was the plan all year, so that's a positive. But it was the secondary plan. The Tour de France was always the main goal, and it was sort of like sort of a thought in the back there. After that, we'll go to Vuelta, all things being ready for it. Obviously, the Tour de France didn't go to plan. He crashed out injured, as Roglic tends to do, and he suffered some real injuries. He had some fractures in his vertebrae or something like that. Not a doctor specialist, as well as not an altitude meter specialist. And there's been rumours about how he's been recovering from that. There was rumours that he might not even line up to the Tour. That said, we have some quotes out of Bora, and it seems like his numbers have been good. We've seen photos of him in altitude training camps, and it seems like his numbers been good. But there is very much a tone of we don't know so much how he's going to cope. And also, they do talk about their team as in the three guys for general classification. And how could you not when he has Alexander Vlasov and Danny Martinez supporting him? That's an obvious factor. Danny Martinez already finished second at the Giro this year to Pogacar, so he finished first of all human beings. And Vlasov is a top rider. We saw Vlasov and Roglic sort of deliver 1-2 punches, with Roglic's goals definitely being prioritized in the Criterium de Dauphiné to great effect. So he's got a really strong team, because those guys can play those really aggressive cards as well, because they have strength beyond those three. Florian Lipwitz is a really good climber, especially if he's on a going day. He's a high GC level climber when he's going really well, to be honest. And even like Eliotti's a really good support rider. Roger Adria, not so much on the long climbs, but he can make an impact in the peloton for sure on the punchier sort of climbs. So they've just got a super strong team. But I do think there's a little we have the doubts about Roglic. We have, I think, reason to doubt Martinez and Vlasov's form as well. Vlasov we've not seen since he also crashed out the Tour. I think I've always felt Vlasov is a guy who flourishes earlier in the season. So I'm not sure how he's going to now arrive at this Vuelta. Martinez, again, he's generally had better success at like the Giro and in that early part of the season than he has later on in the year. And he's raced a few times recently. I think he raced at Clásica San Sebastian, which was a race in heat in Spain, and should have suited him really well. And he didn't show his face. And he's drifted since then. He was like 12-1 at that time. Now he's like 22-1 here. Roglic, however, has a great history at the Vuelta. Multiple-time winner. No matter how bad the Tour de France goes for him, he usually corrects it at the Vuelta. So he's definitely the rightful favourite. My concerns about him, I'm expecting Roglic to be pretty good. I'm thinking Roglic is going to bring a Giro 2023 pretty much Roglic level relative to the field, that is. Cycling numbers are constantly getting better. So he won that Tour. He beat Geraint Thomas and João Almeida. João Almeida's a prominent part of the betting market here too. So that sort of level might be enough to win here. It's definitely enough to put him in contention, but there's a lot of guys in contention, and it doesn't really put him head and shoulders above. It doesn't put him in his own category, which is sort of, even though he's not a prohibitive favourite here, he's a 2-1 shot. That's definitely bettable. The market understands he's not Tadej Pogacar for sure. It just he is the best on paper, but the margins aren't all that great. And there's so much going on here with so many contenders. It's just not for me. I think there's an implication. You look at other markets too, and there's an implication that like on a lot of the like shorter climbs where you have so many mountain stages, as inevitably as well, a lot of these mountain stages become like GC sprints, and Roglic sort of assumed that he's just going to clean those up, and is way better than the rest of the guys at all of that. And I'm not sure he is anymore. I do think that's a part of his arsenal that maybe isn't as strong as it used to be. And I mean, you look at guys like who are peaking, for example, and I'll maybe talk about him a little bit more, but like Mateus Galmos has been targeting the Vuelta for a long time. And this is a guy who finished second at Flèche Wallonne, only being beaten by Pogacar. So he's absolutely competitive with Roglic on those type of finishes for me, even though he's not a guy that I think is a particularly strong contender for the overall. But on those sort of stages where there's a lot of presumption, and the reason why this matters, of course, is because Roglic is expected to accrue bonus points on a lot of these bonus seconds on a lot of these stages, and it's not a given for me. He is very good at them. He has a great success rate, but again, he doesn't Pogacar them. He's not putting bike lengths between himself and his competitors. He's usually like half a bike in front when he wins them. So with Roglic, we're dealing with smaller margins. I do think, and speaking back to that Giro 2023, I think he'll probably grow into a race a little bit. I also think we'll probably get a better price on Roglic after the time trial. Roglic had a disappointing opening time trial in that Giro, and I wouldn't be surprised if he has a slightly disappointing opening time trial here. He's a very good time trialist. But I think he could just warm into a race a little bit. And with Roglic, is never going to be a linear warm into a race. He has bad days. We saw at the Dauphiné, he was smashing the field, really making a case for him to be relevant in the Tour de France battle. And then the final stage, he looks like a totally different guy. And even in the limited time we saw him in the Tour de France, he was clinging on Galibier when there were other riders. I think Rodriguez was fine at that point, sort of thing, when he should have really been a bit more comfortable. He's just not that reliable. So he's not a rider that's going to graph all that comfortably. It's going to be a bit up and down, even if he does grow into a race, and even if he wins it. So that's Primoz. And I do think Vlasov and Martinez are very good riders. I'm not particularly interested in either of them either. I think they have a strong enough team that you can bet a second or third string rider. But for me, I don't think either of them have the program or history to tell me that they are going to be at their best here. So very strong team on paper, but I'm a little bit skeptical that that's going to be borne out on the road. The next strongest team on paper and in this market is UAE for sure. We've got Adam Yates and João Almeida, currently both in here at 13-2 or 7.5 or plus 650 for the Americans. It's my third language, so I will not be using American odds so naturally. Apologies. And even beyond that, we have Isaac Del Toro. Brandon McNulty is also not exactly a 500-1 shot, although I don't think he's particularly relevant. And Yates and Almeida, that duo, you see them in the betting market. And if you've been watching the cycling all season, your mind just goes straight to the Tour de Suisse, where those two were the team leaders for UAE, and they worked in conjunction superbly. They had a very clear tactic. Adam Yates would go up the road, attack. Everyone struggled to follow him. And João Almeida would be the beneficiary in behind, doing the João Almeida style of climbing that suited him perfectly, where he sort of paces himself up behind everyone else. And on one or 2 days, Yates is beneficiary. On another's, Almeida reaped the spoils. Adam Yates did win that Tour de Suisse GC by about 20 seconds, largely because Yates did get away on the 1 day, and group two dynamics did kind of play a factor. I'm sure Almeida could have been closer, and Almeida finished above Yates in the Tour de France quite comfortably. But it did seem Yates did a lot more work for the team for Pogacar, and it was clear that Yates struggled with illness throughout as well. So it's hard to decide who's the stronger candidate for those two, and the betting agrees. They are both in line. Yates, I'm not too sure what his Vuelta history is like off the top of my head. Almeida's is sort of okay. I think he's had a couple of top tens here, a fourth and a ninth. He's a pretty consistent rider. Almeida usually struggles in the cold and the rain, so just by virtue of that, you'd expect him to be perfectly fine in the heat. I think Yates is relatively fine in the heat as well. For sure, he has wins that suggest that in UAE, etc. I lean probably Yates. There's just so much climbing here, and there's climbing with terrain, with hills and valleys and descents, etc. And there's a lot of competitors that I think Almeida's going to lack some tactical speed, to borrow a horse racing term. He's just going to lack his style lacks the tactical speed to be in the right places in the right moments, and I think he'll get caught out. And he's also not. I don't know if he's aggressive enough to win a Grand Tour. I think you do need a little bit of aggression to win a Grand Tour. I don't know if Almeida has that, but hey, Cadel Evans won a Tour de France. Maybe Almeida can win this in a similar way on the time trial on the last day. He'll certainly have some seconds in advantage for that last day against most of his competitors. Opening time trial, I wouldn't, just to reference Roglic expectations, I wouldn't be surprised if Almeida beats Roglic on that opening time trial. I saw the match bet was about 1.6 Roglic, 2.2 on Bet365 yesterday. That was, I think I saw. I'm interested in Almeida there because I just think he's going to enter that a little hotter. Obviously, it is also in Portugal, and that's another thing in the positive for Almeida as well. When he's entered the Vuelta before, it maybe wasn't his biggest goal of the year. Went to the Tour de France this year. I'm not saying this was his biggest goal of the year, but it starts in Portugal by a few stages. I'm sure this has been, and he knew that Pogacar was always going to be very much the only leader in the Tour de France. So I think this was a pretty big part of his thoughts also. So I do lean Yates, but it is very hard to separate those two. Sepp Kuss, I do actually have a bet on Sepp Kuss. Sepp Kuss is currently actually the second favourite ahead of Yates and Almeida at Bet365. He's at 11-2, 6.5 plus 550. I bet Kuss because Ayuso pulled out. They hadn't adjusted yet. There was still a little bit of doubt about Roglic at the time, and Kuss went and won the mountainish stage in Vuelta a Burgos in the lean-up, which again, Spanish, hot. It's a good bit of form to have, albeit it wasn't the strongest field. It also wasn't the most suited stage ever to Kuss. He just showed he was in good form. He's a defending champion. He's a very reliable Grand Tour climber. He's not a great time trialer, which usually holds him back, as well as maybe doing work for others. Well, he's not going to be working for others here, and there's not a whole lot of time trialing. So Kuss seems very solid. He's had a bad year. He does seem to be gaining form. But since then, he was also at Classica San Sebastian, and he didn't have great legs. Disappointed, like Martinez. I think he was actually worse than Martinez. So that's a little bit of a pushback. I think he went into like 3-1 nearly after that Vuelta Burgos win. He's back out now to about 11-2. And I've got my like 8-1 bet there. I'm not like super excited about it. I'm not betting him 11-2, but I've also never really been a Sepp Kuss guy. He is a great descender. So if we get into those sort of long mountain stage battles, raid attacks, etc., that is a weapon he has to play with. Now I'm just going to skip a few guys. I'm just going to go over to Ineos, just because I'm used to talking about Ineos amongst the major teams. They're not really here on paper, but the descending point's an interesting one because they do have Carlos Rodriguez. And another reason why I'm going to Ineos, I do think Carlos Rodriguez is underestimated in the betting market here. He's 25-1. He's coming here on the back of a Tour de France, on the back of a fairly disappointing Tour de France. I think the expectation was for him to be in the top 5. He failed that goal. The whole team suffered of sickness, and it seemed pretty clear to me that a guy who we thought would finish a Grand Tour quite strongly ended up finishing it rather weakly because I think he suffered with sickness also. So I am not holding that against Carlos Rodriguez. I think that Tour de France probably will give him pretty good legs for this. He should be comfortable at home in Spain. He's had some good results this year. He's taken stage wins when he was riding with Ayuso earlier on in the year when they distanced Mateus Skelmoser. He was very strong in that Dauphiné, if I remember rightly. I'm just googling this as I talk now. Yes, he won the final stage as Matteo Jorgensen had to pace. So he's got two stage wins this year, one in Basque Country, one in Dauphiné. He won the general classification at Tour de Romandie. He's actually had a really good year. He just got sick at the end of the Tour de France. It's a little bit concerning to me how they're talking about him as a co-leader with Thymen Arensman and like proper co-leaders, not like a 1A to 1B, because he should be much better than Thymen Arensman. So that's a bit concerning to me, and maybe it does suggest that they're not as confident as I would be initially about his legs going into this. Or maybe he wasn't sick. But my view is that he was sick, and it definitely seemed like that at the time. I think it probably wasn't so much of a target. And that's some of their skepticism, which is absolutely something I have to consider. But he's 25-1. I'm looking at him here, and he's also, somewhat reflected in like young rider markets and top three markets and whatever. He's probably not going to win this Grand Tour. So maybe those are ways to look at. But yeah, I think that's too high. He's great descender, not a great time trialist, not so many time trial in meters here, but he's also had some promising time trials this year that when he is in good form, he's not like an Enric Mas disaster. He's better than that. So that's useful. And the more climbing meters, the better for him. And the fact that it's really hilly terrain as well. I love that for him. And I think Carlos Rodriguez is a bit of an underrated factor in this market. Ahead of him, Enric Mas, not had a great year, always shows up for the Vuelta. Vuelta record is really strong. But I do think that's factored in and some. At 7-1 there, I don't think he's shown the ability. I really do think he's just overrated. I don't have a whole lot more to say on that. They have an interesting team, Movistar, Nairo, and Rubio, some good climbers, but they're not climbing domestiques. They're just good climbers in their own rights. And I'd expect them to sort of go for their own goals, honestly. Although Movistar do some funny tactics and Mas is the guy there. But yeah, I'm really cool on Mas. There's no need to spend too much time on that. Landa had a great tour. Veteran, reliable. Could definitely top three. Again, more of a climber than a time trialist. Yeah, Landa, he's in at 11-1. Unlikely to see him win. Probably he'll be competitive in that top 5 sort of range. So I don't really have a problem with that, and I'm also not that interested in it or have particularly strong thoughts either way. Richie Carapaz, interesting. He's 14-1. Firstly, I'm only going to talk about GC in this video because it's getting super long. But maybe we can have talks about the other markets in a different way. Carapaz, briefly though, is like second favorite King of the Mountains. Now I mentioned him as 20-1 bet in the Tour de France KOM markets whilst the price was going. Admittedly, I'm not trying to after time here, but I liked him at that bad opening number for as long as it lasted. Bet him, he won it, great. I'm a big Carapaz fan. A lot of people mocked Jonathan Vaughters in the Netflix series, saying Carapaz was like third favorite behind Pogacar and Vingegaard for not this year but last year, which wasn't true. But I also don't think it's crazy. I think he's a superb rider, a superb climber. He's stated he's going for the overall here, so I don't understand why he's so prominent the King of Mountain betting. He's just won it at the Tour de France. To win it now at the Vuelta would seem like such a meaningless feat. I don't think he has even the smallest interest in it. I think he's probably the worst bet on the board in that King of the Mountains market. So just steer clear of that if you were thinking about it. From the overall, he's interesting. He's 14-1. Like I say, I think Carapaz is a superb rider. He's not a great time trialist by any means, but climbing, he's great. But I don't think this is the main goal. I think the Tour de France is the main goal, and he entered the Tour de France a little undercooked due to injuries, and then he rode a Tour de France like he never had any interest in using his legs again for walking. He was so aggressive. It looked so tiring. I'm still tired from watching Richie Carapaz at the Tour de France, and I find it hard to believe he's going to be at his best. I hope he is. I love watching him when he's at his best, and he's going to be a real factor if he is at his best. But I think it's unlikely. I've just noticed how Hart is 20-1 to win the Vuelta Espana. That's a move. That's a real move. How Hart was not 20-1 to win the Vuelta. I think he was 80-1 just yesterday. So that's interesting. I'm guessing, trying to Twitter search now, I'm guessing there's been some real positive update on his shape. Great rider. He looked really good in that 2023 Giro before crashing out. But he's been crashing all year. He even crashed at the Vuelta of Burgos in leading up to this, and it's really difficult to see how he could be in his best shape. But interesting, and he's got Mateo Skelmoser on his team. Skelmoser is now double the price. Skelmoser has been targeting this all year. Skelmoser is a young rider with a lot of promise. I don't think he's yet the rider to just be consistent in the high mountains for 3 weeks to compete for a Grand Tour. But he could prove us wrong, and I think the team will certainly be behind Skelmoser, and Hart. Hart was a big sign of him as well. So that's going to be I'm going to listen to a market there and say that is going to be, we're going to get a decent version of Tao Geoghegan Hart, even though I wasn't expecting it until seeing this, to be honest. I'm still a little bit unsure. They're interesting. They're a bit of a wild card team. And I think they could be a real nuisance to Roglic, because Tao Geoghegan Hart's good in the short climb with a sprint. Skelmoser's great there. And Ciccone, who's also here, is also really good there. Ciccone's upset Roglic on these sort of stages in the past. So they could be a real bugbearer for him. But I'm not interested in them from a GC perspective. If I saw good news, if I saw Tao Geoghegan Hart look good and he was still like 50-1, then I would be. But I'm not betting him at 20-1 or even like 30-1 when I don't know it. I need to see it to believe it with him. Quickly, Isaac Del Toro, because I know he was mentioned in the chat. When I looked at the Vuelta odds when they first came up like a week ago, I saw Del Toro at 35-1. I thought, ooh, that's the one that talent to sort of ranking order. Looked wrong. I didn't hit it. I was just a little bit skeptical of how this is going to play out behind Yates and Almeida, and I still am. But I've listened to some views since, and yeah, for sure, Vine's there, McNulty's there, Solaire's there. So it's like the way that Martinez and Vlasov should have their own say. Bora, I think Del Toro should too. Should be able to play his own card a little bit, similar to how he has at some 1 week races this year, where he does a little bit of work on the front and then he peels off and then he rides to finish at his own pace and ends up achieving a top 10 result usually. And I think that's what's going to happen here. I think he'll get a top 10 result. He's a supremely talented rider, by the way, to anyone who doesn't follow the cycling so closely. I would go as far to say this time next year, Isaac Del Toro could clearly be the best rider in this race. I think that's how good he is. But this is his first Grand Tour. And he's not going to start as number one in the pecking order. He absolutely, though, has the talent to deliver a really strong time trial straight out the gate, and just to look strong and change that. So I don't hate those bets. I think young rider in top 10. I think Andrew, I saw, made those bets. I'm not against them. I haven't placed them yet, and I think I've missed a price whilst thinking about it, to be honest. I can totally see it. I think the young rider market is really good. Super competitive market this year, so that's interesting. I would probably play him top 10 if I was going to play him. Maybe that price is probably not moving as fast as well, so I might be able to get down on that some still. But yeah, I'm excited to see what Del Toro can do here for sure. After that, I don't think there's too much that needs mentioning. Chano to Brooks I didn't mention whilst talking about Sepkus and Visma. I'll just talk about Visma a little bit in more detail. I think people are harsh on to Brooks. Everyone's saying he's been like shit, and he has been for the most part. He's only really had one major goal, which was the Giro, where he was going well. He was 5th in general classification, neck and neck with Taberi for a young rider's jersey, and then got COVID and had to withdraw. I don't think he. I think I bet him and advised him for that young riders, and I don't think he would have won based on what we saw from Taberi from that point in. But he was there, and you can't hold it against him. I think I've heard quotes from Visma. It sounds like his role is going to somewhat depend on what happens with Kuss. If Kuss is really prominent in GC, Brooks sort of defaults into a domestique mode. If not, Brooks gets to play his own card. And he's one to keep an eye on, I think, just to see what his price is doing, Young Riders jersey, see what Kuss is doing, see how things go. I'm not betting anything him yet, but he's definitely one to keep an eye on. A couple of guys here. Tiberi, he's back. Brooks is actually favourite, not favourite, Rodriguez is favourite, but I think Brooks is shorter than Tiberi in pretty much all markets, GC, Young Rider, which is the opposite to the Giro. And that's just due to the lack of time trial in meters this time, and also Tiberi as well. He showed pretty poor form in Burgos in the lead up, so I think there's definitely some concerns there. I'm going to leave it there. There's lots of other guys that are interested to talk about in other markets, but my voice is dying, and nobody is listening to this for half an hour, let alone longer.